We're going to do a series of 3 exhibitions to celebrate the 100th year of the Mayer Gallery. My father founded it in January of 1925 at the age of 21, and I took it over in 1973 when I'd come back from New York, having started and run the contemporary art department. It was then Parkman, now Sotheby's, again at 21. So the first show will be the UK and South America. My father was very involved in what was going on in England in the 30s, so this is basically a little group from those years. And then more recently, we've been involved in Latin America. So it's 2 little stories. People say, oh, why don't you do a show of paintings your father showed? Well, that would be, I think, pretentious. What I like about this is it's very domestic. I think people can imagine hanging these in their homes. Part 2 will be Europe. Part 3 will be Eastern Europe or Central Europe and Asia. You might ask why we're not including the USA. Well, next year is the 250th anniversary of America, so in June, July, we'll do a show separate to the this 3-part show. So we'll start Tomasella, who we showed a number of times. This is a particularly beautiful one from 1971, so very early. It's the most atmospheric. With his work, you must never put direct light on it. He always wanted all natural light, and so it picks up the atmosphere. Here you can see it goes to pinks, to blue, and then when you come across it, it changes completely. It's a very beautiful example of it. Cordillera, Valdemar Cordillera, who we've shown a couple of times and organized a show last year at the ZKM Museum. This is a typical work from 1950s, when he's concrete at the best, and it's very complex but very simple. And this one, the blues are very subtle, and it's really a painting you've got to get into and really absorb. Mira Schendel, we've been selling them over the years. This is a very pretty little one from her nocturnal landscape series. Very subtle and very beautiful. Caioli, who was from the Argentine but came to Europe, as did Tomasella. He was a structuralist, showed with the structuralists. He was obsessed with plexiglass, much to the sadness of his son, because any money made went into plexiglass. I think plexiglass gives him a sad taste in his mouth. Lozza from the Argentine. I love these sort of 3-dimensional but 2-dimensional. I like very much the juxtaposition of this, the Caioli, the Lozza, and then Gago, who was originally from Germany, refugee to Venezuela, Mavigny, who would be celebrating his 100th anniversary this year. Now, these small paintings are very beautiful and very rare. He only gave them to his friends. And in fact, I had 2 I bought from Hans Meyer. He was given them both as wedding presents, one for his first marriage and the second to the second marriage. And for his 80th birthday, he asked people to write little things, and I said, I just hope I didn't have to buy a third from him. But it's interesting that these small, beautiful ones were always very personal. Felicia Burstein, who I think is an extraordinary artist. She was conceived in Poland and born in Colombia in 1933, died in Paris in 81, I think, or 82. She was very political, and she fled Colombia. Her parents managed to get some money out when they went there, so she was able to go as a young woman to America to study and to France. Her last few weeks, literally, were in France, where she escaped to via Mexico. She really is an extraordinary artist. People sort of say, oh, she looks like Chamberlain. There isn't anything really about Chamberlain except she used cars and things. An extraordinary welder. And, you know, you go round it, she really is a star. Then we have this whole little group of South American surrealists, Alice Raul, and this particular painting has been traveling in various exhibitions of women's art in the last 2-3 years, so it's back home and available. A very sweet little Matta and a really extraordinary drawing by Wilfredo Lamb, which was shown in his first show in England, which was in 1946 at the London Gallery, originally E.L.T. Messens and Roland Penrose, and then George Melly worked for them after the war. And this one was in the 1946 show at the London Gallery and used to belong to George Melly. At the moment there's a major exhibition retrospective at MoMA in New York, so it's a real little gem. An amazing triptych done by Arkai, who was Cuban, who came over. He was a printer, a fine art printer, stopped painting in 1962. His last exhibition was at Denise René, and then just literally did seriographs for Denise René of all the artists. But this was a commissioned mural and was exhibited a number of times, but it's really very much of its time. Of the Cubans that came to Europe, I think he was by far the most exciting. Now we have one more Latin American work. This is a group by a group called Los Carpinteros. They were originally 3 of them, and then there were 2, and now there are none. They broke up. So this is from the 2. This was was in a show going around South America and was on the cover of the catalogue. As a technique of watercolour, it's quite extraordinary. You really think it's 3-dimensional. You know, here it's hard. It really shows, you know, watercolour is an extremely complicated medium, and this really shows what you can do. And it's, to me, absolutely amazing. You know, I've sat at this desk and looked into it, and you're absolutely mesmerized by it. And sadly, you know, they've broken up, and so there'll be no more. But they really, this is exciting. So now we come into the English group, F.E. McWilliam, sculpture from 1935. You know, I think that the English sculptors in the 30s were extraordinary, but this is the technique and the beauty of it would give Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth a run for their money. To me, it's so beautiful, and it's sort of like an ear. Edith Rimmington, who was one of the best of the English surrealist women. This is, to me, as good as you can get. The date is right, it's 1938. All these women are in oblivion. They're not dead, they're going to come back. And it's collage and everything. It really is as good as you can get. So there's a lovely Graham Sutherland from 42. My father gave him his first show in the late 30s, which was very successful. Sort of Kenneth Clark and everybody bought them. But I think that he's an extraordinary artist. The problem was, by the 50s, his wife was rather expensive, and the Italians liked them a lot. And so he didn't go very far, go forward very much, but this has everything you want. I think he was probably the greatest portrait painter in the 20th century. You know, when you see him, he really gets into and maybe he got too far into Churchill's character, therefore they destroyed it. It is, he was those early ones, and then the ones etchings earlier on, which are out in the 20s, which are extraordinary. He, underrated, but partly because of mass production, and the Italians would come over with suitcases of cash, and he'd take the cash and give them a suitcase of watercolours, which was sad. Another of the English surrealist women, Emmy Bridgwater. This one is towards the end of the war, and it really has all the sadness, pathos, whatever you want about war. I think it's an extraordinary painting about what was happening. She was one of the few English Breton in the last ordained, you might say, show of Surrealism, which was in 1947 at Gallery Mecht, and she was one of the very few English artists to actually be asked to exhibit. Roland Penrose, who had the misfortune as an artist to have been rich, and so people, rich artists sort of looked down on a bit. And he was a great friend of Max Ernst, and so, he learned frottage from Max Ernst, and he, with Herbert Reed and Messens, were responsible for the 1936 Great International Surrealist Show at the Burlington Galleries. But it's a lovely thing, and, he deserves better recognition. Two very good Burra drawings. My father knew him well in the 30s, but these work very well. Then this is one of the nicest, best paintings by Peter Rose Pulham I've ever seen. He showed with the London Gallery, and this again used to belong to George Melly. There is a lot of Magritte influence, but Messens was Magritte's greatest supporter. And this egg is really fantastic, just sitting on the mantelpiece. There are two of the other, Banting, a charming little piece, and then Hayter. Now, Hayter's problem was that he was born in England, went to France. In the war, he went to America, and then he went back to France. So the French think he's English, the English think he's French. And then he was always a very good painter, but he's better known for being a printmaker, and he had Atelier 17, and when it went to America because of the war, was incredibly important, because the Europeans that went there were printing there, and he taught people like Pollock how to do print. So he was always misunderstood as a painter, and probably his most exciting period of painting was in America in the war, and this is exactly what this is. And so it's a perfect... My father did show him in the 30s. So basically, that is the story. So it's on till just before Christmas. So I hope you can come and see it. Thank you very much.